Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Kavam, a Doctor Who podcast where we generally talk about all things Doctor Who, DVDs, Blu-rays, special features, documentaries. And we're kind of not doing that today, particularly because I feel like there's not much news about Blu-rays and DVDs. Like, there's no collection release announced, there's no animation announced, there's no missing episodes that have been revealed, there's no even new series box set being released. Like, there's nothing right now. So I thought, given it's the 60th anniversary year, we'd do a little sort of two-part series of episodes where today we're going to be talking about our best and worst episodes of classic Doctor Who, covering the whole of 1963 to 1989, revealing our top 5 and bottom 5 Doctor Who stories. I think it's going to be fun. It's going to be an interesting experience. Of course, I think for the first time in a very long time, I'm joined by all 3 of my special guests, my, I guess co-hosts, really. You're not guests. You're here every time. It is Charlie, Ryan, and Bill. Charlie, is it good to be back after a few weeks back on the podcast, having a bit of fun?
It's great to be back. Yeah, I think the last time I recorded one of these properly was like February or something. It's crazy. This year's going so fast.
Yeah.
I've got some best and worst stories for you guys.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, I'll let you guys think of them what you will. They're not the craziest hot takes, but they're a couple of them might come as a little bit of a surprise.
Well, I'm certainly looking forward to it. Like, I feel we've got to have some hot takes in here. Otherwise, we can't just all pick City of Death as the best one and Time Lash as the worst. Like, maybe you guys have, but hopefully not all 4 of us have.
I think all of you know my number one favorite, probably. I think I've mentioned it a few times.
Yes. We will find out if we all got it right a bit later on. I look forward to it. Ryan, how many minutes of this podcast is it going to take for you to mention Erato?
Who knows? It probably not that long, to be honest, because it's always inevitable when it comes to this podcast. Errata always rears well, it doesn't really have a head, to be honest. It's something
rears
big,
its ugly blob.
Not a head.
Yes, exactly. So, well, I look forward to finding out whether Erato features at all in the rest of today's podcast. We will find out later. And Bill, it's great to have you back again as well. Are you excited to share? Do you feel like you've got any controversial takes in any of your choices today?
I'll just get out the list just to make sure. But no, I don't. It's certainly not the worst anyway. I don't think that's going to be very controversial.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's fairly like the ones I've gone with tend to be quite badly regarded by most fans anyway.
Okay, well, I look forward to finding out. We're going to save the worst till last, I suppose you should say, and we're going to talk about the best one first. But before we do that, I thought we should have a quick mention of what's going on in actual Doctor Who at the moment, because they are making a series. There are some episodes actually coming out this year. It is the 60th anniversary after all. As much as it doesn't always feel like it, I feel like this year we are getting 3 episodes of Doctor Who in November and a Christmas special, and it's all quite exciting. And so a week or so ago, just before Eurovision started, we saw a new teaser trailer which revealed the titles for the episodes, albeit they leaked earlier in the day, as was inevitable with everything Doctor Who related. It leaks first. So we have 3 titles for the 3 specials, which are The Star Beast. I think it's, hang on, I've lost the list. The Star Beast, Wild Blue Yonder, and The Giggle. So, Ryan, I'm automatically thinking about The Giggle and going, what the heck is this? Like, when I think about Doctor Who, what's presumably regeneration episodes, you've got To the End of Time, Time of the Doctor, The Power of the Doctor, and The Giggle. I believe in Russell. What's this all about? Any ideas?
I have absolutely no idea. I wish I knew I wish I could help you on that one, but it's so funny. One of the briefest Doctors, David Tennant's return, and what's his last story? The Giggle. it's a little bit, yeah, it doesn't quite have as much punch to it as something like End of Time. What as messy as that story was, at least it had a good title.
Well, exactly. Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like it makes me want to laugh every time I say it, and I'm just like, this is going to be some serious high stakes story, probably. But well, we'll find out in 6 months' time as to what exactly it's all about. Charlie, the Star Beast, I guess, references the comic that we think that this half of the special is being based off. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, I mean, we obviously saw the scene in the trailer where Donna touches Beep the Meat,
Yep.
thinking it's a stuffed toy, and then it says something. I can't quite remember. It just sort of
It
makes
makes
a
a noise, doesn't it? Does it actually say
Yeah,
in dialogue? I
it's
can't remember.
yeah, that should be an interesting one. I quite like how with these titles we now sort of have an idea of the structure of this.
Yes.
Like we get the sense that the first one is Donna Noble, Beep the Meep, all the filming they did in Camden back in like last July, I want to say.
I think it was more
something-
like May or June. I think it was pretty much a
Oh,
year
was
ago
it?
now, because they
Yeah.
announced David Tennant and Catherine Tate in May last year, and then it wasn't like the next day they started filming with them.
Yes, yeah, because
So-
there was a whole picture of Bernard Cribbins back then.
Yes.
Yeah. So that should be the first special. Wild Blue Yonder, no one knows what's up with that.
Yeah.
And then
So
obviously
weird.
Giggle. I'm guessing the giggle. I mean, we heard like an actual giggle in the trailer, didn't we? I'm guessing that's Neil Patrick Harris's Celestial Toymaker, which isn't confirmed, but it kind of is.
It kind of is. Yeah.
Um,
I would tend to agree. I think what's intriguing to me is whether he's going to turn up from the first episode or whether he's just in the final episode. You kind of think he's kind of the big bad of the whole thing.
Yeah,
I would imagine that he's the main villain of the whole thing. If not, then I have no idea what Russell seems to be planning with this story. But I would imagine that he would be playing the toy maker. I mean, he has to be the toy maker. I would be shocked if Russell does like an announcement saying, "Nope, he's not the toy maker."
Yeah, exactly. Well, no, I'm sure he is. And well, once they officially announce it, which they inevitably will, I guess we'll have to all sit down and watch 3 reconstructions and an episode of the Celestial Toymaker and talk about it on the podcast. So it's not quite in my worst 5 of Who, but I don't think it would be that far off. So
Whoa. I actually really like the Celestial
controversial, I know, but not one of
I find that story very fascinating, but hey. But
well, maybe,
I hope
maybe later this year I will reevaluate it and we'll see. We'll see how it turns out.
Please let there be an animation, please.
Yes. It makes so much sense. It seems so obvious. Like a month before the special is released, announces the Toymaker and announce an animation of the Celestial Toymaker. Oh, look, you can watch this story that will catch you up on the Celestial Toymaker from 60 years ago. It makes so much sense. But, the BBC, who knows? And Bill, we're kind of going in the a slightly random order, but the second special, Wild Blue Yonder, it seems like the BBC are intentionally kind of keeping it a secret, holding everything back. In this trailer, we saw footage from Special 1 and Special 3, but Wild Blue Yonder seemed to have the footage sort of redacted, like we'd seen in some of these teaser trailers. Have we got any ideas as to why?
Well, yeah, like you say, there's got to be a very good reason for why that's the case. I would assume, I believe David Tennant and/or Catherine Tate said they'd filmed with other people, like on probably just in studio, and that was all kept a secret. So maybe that's for Wild Blue Yonder, maybe that's for Special 2. So maybe that is going to be more, at least in terms of tone, not necessarily like you're going to have past Doctors or past companions there, but you may, at least in terms of tone, it may feel like a more traditional anniversary special. But then I saw, I think it was like part of the interior for the second Matt Smith TARDIS in the trailer, like a wall from it. So at least something that looks similar. If not, then I kind of think, well, maybe it's just something entirely set in the TARDIS. Maybe it's like the TARDIS. We would just sort of get like little Easter eggs, like some of the past console rooms or something. But yeah, it does make you wonder if they're keen to kind of give away a decent amount for the other 2 specials, why they're not giving the same for that one. So there must be a very good reason for that.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that they talked about, I think Murray Gold, when he was announced, he talked about how he hadn't composed any music for Special 2 yet. Like, they'd done quite a lot on the first and the third one, but for whatever reason, there'd been nothing done on this second one. So, I mean, my kind of theory is whether it's something to do with Ncuti being in that episode, and they're going to sort of do a sort of, don't know quite how, but I feel like he might rock up in that episode and be a significant part of it, and then he'll disappear for Special 3 for some reason, and then obviously pick up at Christmas. I feel like that might be logical, because then maybe they had to film that stuff later when he'd finished with Sex Education and filmed it at the start of the current series filming that they've been doing for the last sort of 6 months or so. possibly. But also, I know there's lots of rumors about Matt Smith. I don't know, Charlie, do you have any theories on the mysterious Wild Blue Yonder?
I mean, Matt Smith returning would obviously be amazing.
That'd be the dream, yeah.
I mean, any previous Doctor returning would be amazing.
Pretty much.
Paul McGann, obviously he already did, but properly, that would be incredible. But I don't want to get my hopes up too much, because at the end of the day, it's not Day of the Doctor. It's just a multiple of 10 anniversary. And sure, we had 3 Doctors, 5 Doctors. It would make sense, but I'm trying not to get my hopes up too much. I've seen lots of theories saying that Wild Blue Yonder is just a placeholder for the actual title, which is a huge spoiler and will actually be revealed after the first special airs, which isn't out of the question because it's such a weird title.
But then why would they even bother naming it that? Like, naming it a spoilery title?
I guess
would be my argument against that, but I like that idea. Like at the end of the first one, they
Um,
reveal some shocking thing, I don't know, of a monster or a doctor or something, and then the second episode is all about that. I guess
there's definitely something weird happening. It's something big. Some Doctor, whether it be Ncuti or Matt Smith, or maybe even the Daleks or something. I mean, the Daleks have got to appear. It's Doctor Who's 60th anniversary. They've got to show up.
Yeah, they've got to have at least a cameo or something. Like, it can't just be Beat the Meat, like, surely.
Yeah.
Beat the Meat, the Toy Maker is just such a random selection. You've got to have the Daleks in there.
Yeah, it does. Sorry, go for it, Ryan.
I've heard like a rumor, but I don't know if there's really any truth to this. But I wouldn't be surprised if that regeneration limbo area that was in Power of the Doctor might be making a reappearance in the 60th, but instead of classic Doctors, it's modern Doctors this time round, where we could have the 10th Doctor, the David Tennant 10th Doctor.
Yeah.
So it'd be 2 David Tennants, Matt Smith, and Jodie Whittaker possibly turning up. I think if any modern Doctors will be returning, it'll be Matt Smith and Jodie Whittaker. I don't think, obviously, Eccleston won't come back, and even Peter Capaldi won't come back. So it'll be just, if any modern Doctors will return, it'll just be those two.
You've now made me worried that we're going to have the ultimate multi-Doctor story where it's the 14th Doctor meets the 10th Doctor, and we just watch 2 David Tennants running around for the whole special, and I'll just be like, yeah, not. I like David Tennant, but I don't need him to be both of the Doctors in the special. That's maybe a step too far.
Imagine if they do. It might be if they do Guardians of like the regeneration limbo. I think it might make sense if there were 2 David Tennant Doctors in for just that scene.
Yes, I agree for that scene.
I wonder if they do the 10th Doctor, would they be doing some like de-aging technology for David Tennant? A little tiny bit of de-aging for because don't get me wrong, David Tennant looks great, but he doesn't quite look like how he does like 15, 20 years ago. So
yeah, I think you can tell he's aged a bit because it is like 17 years since he filmed Christmas Invasion, so it's no wonder that he's aged a little bit in that time. But yeah, I'd be intrigued to see if they approach anything like that. But well, I guess we're ultimately just gonna have to wait and see, because Russell's like giving us little bits here and there, but also keeping it very sort of quiet as well. I feel like I think, as far as we can tell, we're nearly at the end of filming of Ncuti's first season as well, which is really exciting. So hopefully pretty soon off the back of the Christmas special, we'll get that first season airing in early next year. So I feel like once we get through these next 6 months, get to November, then it's going to be like full flowing Doctor Who, all the rumours of spin-offs as well and all this. I think it's going to be really, really exciting. I know San Diego Comic-Con's coming up in a couple of months as well, which a lot of people are expecting Doctor Who might make a big reappearance there, and maybe another new trailer. Would you guys like to see that?
Sounds cool. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if David Tennant appeared there along with Russell, just like how they did back in 2009.
Yeah. Exactly.
They've got to, really, because the marketing's been so bad since like 2018. I think they've got to do a big comeback for marketing for the new era, which Russell, he's good at marketing. He knew how to get Doctor Who huge back in like, the 2000s. So he's probably going to do it again.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like he's been doing quite well so far with the trailers and information and things. But I'm sort of intrigued how, when we get closer to the actual series starting, almost how they'll go about marketing both the specials and Ncuti Gatwa, because to a new fan, it's almost very hard to market the 60th anniversary, because it's like, oh, here's this old Doctor who's actually not an old Doctor with all these old monsters you've never heard of from comics. But actually, if you wait 3 episodes, then there's just a new guy and you can just jump on then. It's sort of like, Russell will make it work, but I feel like it's actually quite a difficult almost point to try and relaunch the show from, because it's not just with a fresh new era of Ncuti, which probably would be a lot easier. So I don't know. I'm just intrigued how he approaches that, really.
I mean, the way I'm seeing it, the 60th is to kind of bring back the old fans who kind of, it sounds mean, but fell out of love with the show with Chibnall's era. And then the series 14 is to sort of bring in some new viewers.
Yeah.
But I feel the 60th is just maybe to sort of gain trust in the original audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. It's a bit more for the current fans and to bring back the ones that watched it in 2008. And then from next year, starting with Ncuti, it's hello, new world, new fans, come join us because it's a real fun ride. And then you can go back and watch 13 seasons of it, or 39 seasons of it, I guess. Yes. And speaking of 39 seasons, well, we're not going to cover all 39 today. That was a good segue, wasn't it? We're going to talk about the first 26 seasons of Doctor Who, the classic series, and share our best and worst stories. So I wanted to start today with the best, because it's more fun to finish on the worst stories, and we'll all reveal the nadir of Doctor Who to you in about half an hour, hopefully. But we'll start with the best, and the way we're going to do this, we've all got a list of 5. Well, my list is longer than 5, but I'm going to say 5 of them, and we'll see how that goes. And we're going to reveal 4 of them. We're going to go around and each reveal 4 of them as we go, explaining some reasoning, or not. You can just say, yeah, this story's terrible, the end. But also, we'll try and give you some insight. We'll reveal 4 of them, and then we'll all reveal our best of all-time Doctor Who, or classic Doctor Who, not all-time, of classic Doctor Who, and then we'll do the same with the worst. So, Charlie, given that you haven't been around for a little while, I'm going to give you the floor to start us off with 4, your kind of 2, 3, 4, 5, I suppose, of new Who. This is classic Who, jeez. Classic Who. Yeah, take it away, because I can't talk anymore.
Yeah. So while we've been doing this starter, I've ranked 2, 3, 4, and 5. I hadn't done it before, but so in 5th place, I've got the Dalek Invasion of Earth.
Interesting. Okay.
It's great. I never used to like this one as much. I always thought of it as like like an 8 out of 10. Like it's a good one.
Yeah.
But I've since gained a huge appreciation for this one. Like it's really good. And I'd say I prefer it to well, yeah, it's my favorite Dalek story. Okay. There's no other Dalek.
There we go. Spoiler alert, no other Dalek stories.
No, great. No Evil of the Daleks. No Power of the Daleks. Just yeah. But I feel it's the first big epic Doctor Who story. Like the Daleks kind of was like it's Terry Nation's thing to do big epic sprawling stories. Mm-hmm. But I feel this is the first one where it actually kind of works on the budget. Like, you have these shots of Daleks going all over London, and the new special effects that they added like 20 years ago now, they aren't great, but it just adds a sense of like scale to it that I just really like. People complain about Susan's exit, and maybe it hasn't aged the best. It's, it is a bit weird looking back, but I feel it's just the first like major character moment for William Hartnell's first Doctor. And I think it adds a lot more depth to his character, that whole speech. Like it was absolutely fantastic. I'd say it's one of my favorite Doctor speeches of all time. Doesn't quite compare to, Peter Capaldi, but who can? It's really great. I love the Dalek Invasion of Earth. There are some, I can definitely see why people think it drags. I get it, but I just love it. It's just classic like comfort Doctor Who for me. Mm-hmm. 4th place, I've got The Enemy of the World.
Nice, good choice. I like that.
I love The Enemy of the World. I know in the like audition sort of thing I did for this podcast, I talked about The Enemy of the World.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, that was great. Yeah.
Like 2 years ago. But
yeah, wow. It has been over 2 years.
The Enemy of the World. I don't really need to explain why this is great. It's a James Bond film that's Doctor Who. It's got Patrick Troughton and Fraser Hines on top form. It's Salamander is amazing. One of my favorite like non-recurring villains. It's just great. And the scale, the action sequences, it felt like this and the Web of Fear were like precursors to the Pertwee era, and like the spy sort of feel that we got in seasons 7 and to a lesser extent 8, but still it feels like it was building up to what the Pertwee era would become.
Yeah.
In third place, I've got the Seeds of Doom.
Nice. Okay.
It's a great one.
Yeah. Good choice.
The only Tom Baker one on this list. But it's a brilliant one. I just feel it's the pinnacle of like the golden age of Doctor Who, as people call it. Like, it's Tom Baker, Elizabeth Sladen, Peter Hinchcliffe, just all on top form. I like how they split it into, like, you got the 2-parter in Antarctica, then you got the 4-parter. That villain, Harrison Chase, is amazing. The Crinoid is such a cool villain. It's just great stuff,
Mm-hmm.
You do have the Fourth Doctor, like, snapping people's necks a little bit. That bit was a bit caught me off guard, but
It's a little bit different.
it's kind of a callback to the Pertwee era.
Well, yeah.
The sense that we've got like an action hero sort of Doctor. It's just so fun, and even the I can't even remember his name. The side character henchman kind of guy.
Scorby.
Yes. Yeah, he was great. Classic like henchman turned. Oh, my webcam just turned off. Oh,
lost the camera. Oh no. Well, for those listening audio, it's not a problem.
Yeah, I'll get that sorted too. But yeah, it's just a fantastic story. Second place, I've got Frontier in Space.
Oh, nice.
Weirdly, the only Pertwee story on this list, even though it's my favorite era and favorite Doctor, this is the only one that's on there.
Yeah.
But Frontier in Space, it's people like to complain about the endless prison cells.
Yeah.
But I feel when they're in the prison cells, it's just a chance for the Third Doctor and Jo to just have amazing chemistry. That's what this is. It's basically just a character study into the Third Doctor, Jo, and Roger Delgado's Master. And it works. It's great. But at the same time, it has a lot of lore and world building as to this galactic war. And on such a tight budget, I think it does this very, very well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it feels like a classic sci-fi novel, and it's just a great story. I mean, episode 4 especially is basically just the Master's got the Third Doctor and Jo captured on his ship. That's all it is, and it's just those 3 characters having chemistry. And yeah, those are my picks.
4 out of 5. Yes, brilliant. Well, Ryan, Bill, any strong disagreements there, and like, why have you put that there? It's a terrible idea.
Well, I will say, I know there's going to be a little bit of a spoiler from my list, but we've pretty much lined up for number 5 because Dalek Invasion of Earth is my number 5. So you do, and I completely agree. I wish I could love Frontier in Space. I mean, there are elements of Frontier Space that I do love. As I said, it does provide like the chemistry between the Third Doctor, Jo, and the Master is all brilliant. And I will agree the lore building, like everything is, that part's great, but it does drag on a bit too much with the whole getting recaptured and all that. And I just feel like if it had been tightened up, I mean, this is only just me, if it was tightened up to like a 4-part story instead of a 6-part story, I think I would have liked it, enjoyed it more. But I mean, it's not bad. It's definitely not bad. I mean, there are much worse Pascal stories. I mean, we're going to get to them eventually. But I mean, I don't think it's among the best. It's not among the worst. For me, it's just right in the middle for me. So, it's not bad.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I understand that's probably the least popular pick I've got in my top 5, but I love it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely understandable. Definitely.
I feel like I've got 2 that will be like what you going on about. So I wouldn't worry about any other one, Charlie. I think it's. I really like Frontier in Space. I've always thought it's a really good story. I probably wouldn't put it ahead of all the other Pertwee stories, but I do really. I love the Draconians as monsters. As you say, the character study stuff with Jo and the Doctor and the Master is great. And for me, I don't see it as a big issue they keep ending up in prisons and things like that. I think that it's a little bit escape capture, but there are great escape capture stories out there, and I think this is one of them. Even with the sort of terrible looking monster at the end that's supposed to scare the Daleks. That's we don't talk about that bit. But the actual end, if I feel like this would be could almost be an all-time classic story if they'd actually kind of nailed the ending a little bit more, because the editing's so messy with Delgado's final scenes. Obviously they didn't know at the time that was going to be his final scenes, but the way that's all done is just unfortunately really bad. And I almost feel like if that had actually really been done really well and slick, I think the story might be remembered better. Just a little thing that I think could have made quite a big difference there, but that's really interesting. And Bill, have you got any big disagreements here?
No, I think they're all very good picks that Charlie's gone with. I would say, personally, just like Ryan, I'm not sure if I would put Frontier in Space there, but purely because of pretty much everything else that you guys have just said, like it is basically, for me anyway, it suffers from this classic six-parter itis, basically. And I would take it over something like Colony in Space, 100%, because it's definitely got, more interesting characters, more interesting stuff going on in it. But yeah, it would probably just be in the middle for me as well.
I feel the Pertwee era gives 6 parts to the wrong stories and 4 parts to the wrong stories. Like so many 4-parters like Carnival of Monsters, Curse of Peladon could have been 6 episodes.
Yeah.
But so many 6-parters like Monster of Peladon and Colony in Space could have been 4. This, I mean, I love it so much. I think it's 6 is fine for this, but I get it.
Yeah, I think it's always a challenge with longer Doctor Who. Some of them work really well, some of them are just dragging and painful. But I'm sure we'll come on to that later. So Ryan, you've already given away your number 5 in Dalek Invasion of Earth. Do you want to take us through your next 3, or any more thoughts on Dalek Invasion of Earth and any on the other 3 as well?
Yeah, I will say very quickly in terms of like honourable mentions. I mean, stuff like Dalek's Master Plan, Tomb of the Cybermen, and City of Death, Tale of the Autons Inferno, Caves of Androzani, and pretty much a good chunk of Golden Age Tom Baker Doctor Who didn't quite make the list, but and some of the, a couple of them did, but the rest of them didn't quite make it. And of course, some of the Sylvester McCoy ones, like Remembrance of the Daleks, Greatest Show in the Galaxy, Survival, Curse of Fenric. As much as I love that story, it didn't quite make the list. Even some of the weird off-kilter ones, like Pirate Planet and even Enlightenment, some of the more weirder out there ones, didn't quite make the list as well. But they nearly did. But I went with my top 5, and number 5 is Dalek Invasion of Earth. I've absolutely loved this story. I think it's probably my favorite William Hartnell story. It's such a really good, like, post-apocalyptic Dalek story in a way, and it's a good example of how to do like a post-apocalyptic story in Doctor Who. I think it's one of the better examples of that, and it's a great Dalek story. The fact that it's where the Doctor and his companions risk so much, and they end up losing something as a result because Susan leaves at the end of it. So there is a bit of a tragedy involved in it, and it's just again, everything else is pretty much echoing what you just said, Charlie. It's such a great story. My number 4 is my favorite John Pertwee story, The Demons.
Yes.
Of course.
I love The Demons so much. It's such a great gothic horror type story, and I think it's the best use of Roger Delgado's Master. I think it's him disguised as a vicar and using his status there as a vicar to sort of manipulate the locals, and having this weird sort of cult to bring forth this ancient demon that's been misinterpreted as the devil, and how it ties in Azal, and how it ties into the Master's plan was so brilliantly well done. Again, I think it's also the best use of the Doctor, Joe, and the unit family. It's all of them on top form. Pertwee just having the time of his life in this story. You could tell this was one of his personal favorites. I think he said ever since that this is one of his personal favourites, and you can easily tell that on screen.
Yeah.
Everyone's just having a great time. Even the one-off supporting characters like Sergeant Osgood, that unfortunate technician, and it's so iconic that I'm surprised they didn't even bring him back afterwards, because he fitted in so well with the rest of the unit family. And so yeah, I just think it's such an amazing story that kind of solidified why John Pertwee is up there along with the original first four Doctors and Capaldi as some of my personal favourite Doctors ever. It's such a great story. My number 3, it is a special Tom Baker one. It is one of the Golden Age ones, Pyramids of Mars.
Excellent. Okay. Yeah.
This such a great horror story, and I like that it uses like Egyptian mythology and ties that into this alien species with the Osirans, and I think they need to bring the Osirans back, because I think the Osirans is such a great, like, mysterious sort of ancient immortal beings in the same vein as like the Eternals or the Time Lords, or something like these ancient beings that I feel like need to come back, because I feel like how they built up Sutekh in this story is so amazing, because you get the sense of he is just an unstoppable villain. Like and I think that's all because of Gabriel Wolf's brilliant, like, physical and vocal performance as well as Sutekh, and so it's just absolutely incredible. And also Tom Baker is brilliant, because he's really not acting flippant at all in this story. You can tell that the situation is serious, and that adds to the weight and drama of the situation, which kind of explains why in some of his later stories he became too flippant, which implies a lack of threat. So I'm happy that they decided to make us as dark and as serious as possible. And yeah, I just absolutely love Pyramids of Mars. I just love like the atmosphere, how they use Egyptian mythology and ties it into the main enemy threat of the narrative. It's such a brilliant story, and I can definitely see why it's so beloved. My number 2, and this may be a bit of, I don't know if this may be a bit of an out there choice. It's my favourite Patrick Troughton story, The War Games.
Okay.
His last story. In my opinion, this is the best final regeneration story for a classic Doctor. I know a lot of people love Case of Androzani, and I think that one is great, but if you were to ask me which is the best regeneration story of classic Doctor 2, it would be The War Games. I mean, yes, it's 10 parts. I mean, I think it's 10 parts.
Yeah.
It never felt like it was dragging at all. They find a way of adding new twists and refreshing things with each story. Like, for 1 minute, they're in this time period, and you think it's going to be a period piece in World War One, but then it changes again with a different time period, and you're thinking, what's going on here? And the more you learn about it, and the more the threat behind it, it makes it much more intense and dire, and it gets to the point where you get the sense this is an unstoppable situation that even the Doctor can't solve on his own, that he has to bring in the big guns with the Time Lords. And of course, this is one of the most significant pieces of lore drops in Doctor's history, because it introduces the Time Lords and finally reveals who the Doctor species are, and you just get the sense of how powerful the Time Lords are. I mean, I don't think this is easily the best portrayal of the Time Lords to date. I don't think any subsequent story is going to nail just how perfect the Time Lords are, like they are in this story. And you just get the sense of how terrifying and omniscient that they are, and you understand why the Doctor ran away from them in the first place. So,
well, thank you for that list so far, Ryan. Charlie, Bill, have you got any thoughts on those? There's some interesting choices in there, I feel like. I don't know. Have you, Charlie?
I think it's a solid list. There's nothing in there that I wouldn't say is like my top 30, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Demons is in my top 10. It's
Okay.
definitely an honorable mention for me. I love it. I think, yeah, it's the best use of the Master possibly in Doctor Who history. It's just, I feel it's just it just captures the essence of the Master as a character perfectly. I just think it works so well. And yeah, obviously, I said about Dalek Invasion of Earth. Pyramids of Mars is a great one. Not my favorite of season 13, even, but yeah, it's a really good one. I love Pyramids of Mars, and yeah, the War Games is amazing. Yeah, I love it. We'll talk more about that later, though.
Exactly. And Bill, any thoughts on these as well? Happy with his choices?
Yeah, again, another great list. I can't talk about one of them as that's my top one. So,
Oh,
yeah,
interesting. Don't give us away which one.
I can't say yet.
Intrigue.
But the others, yeah, I just 100% agree, pretty much. I mean, there's like Pyramids of Mars, that's a great choice. Dalek Invasion of Earth, I think, yeah, that's a pretty good choice as well. Yeah, I would say I think so far our tastes are they're not that far away from each other, really, ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, but I'm impressed so far. We've had out of the 8 stories we've given, I think 7 of them have been different. So I feel like that's, we've got a good bit of variety going on here, which is always nice and is always fun. So Bill, over to you. You're going to keep up the variety with your next 4 choices. I'm intrigued.
Well, some of my others have already been said as well, so I can't promise complete variety.
That's okay. That's okay.
But I will say that The Enemy of the World is also on my top 5 in
Excellent.
5th place because just as Charlie was saying earlier, just a great story, great spy thriller. Always loved it, even when it was missing, and even more so now with us having it and everything to watch. Yeah, just a great story, one of Patrick Troughton's like finest hours, really. And then this is a story that I'm surprised hasn't already been mentioned, and that is The Green Death.
Oh yeah, good choice. I know.
Yeah, because I would say that again. I think it is one of them stories that is pretty well regarded, and for very good reason. I mean, you've got the whole Jo leaving and the final few minutes with the Doctor and her and saying goodbye. That is very emotional, and just then the Doctor driving away in Bessie. It's just a really powerful kind of. You don't necessarily need to. It's not like the show needs to say, "Oh, the Doctor is sad." You get that sense of he is upset of Jo leaving, and you get that sense of how much, from not really wanting anything to do with her when he first met her, to now coming to actually really miss her. I mean, that's really good. City of Death, 3rd favorite. Yeah, I would say it's good fun ultimately, and it is. I would say it is Douglas Adams's best out of the few stories that he did. I enjoy Pirate Planet and Sharda, but City of Death just clinches it out because the jokes, they just kind of it just suits the story really at the end of the day. Like, it is completely silly and over the top, but it works in the setting, and it is very much a case of them going, oh look, we can go to Paris now, let's make, they really do hammer that home and make good use of that. But why not? If when you've got the Eiffel Tower and the Louvre and stuff like that, why not use such great imagery like that? And Julian Glover as Scaroff, he's just a great actor anyway, and a great villain. Yeah, I mean, it's just a very sort of like, it's one of them Doctor Who stories that for me I could just put on, and it doesn't matter what moods I'm in before starting it. I always, it cheers me up essentially, and yeah, brightens my day essentially. And then second favorite, I would say, is Inferno.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Now I mean it's quite surprising because a lot of my top five here are longer stories, but obviously, I mean, the longer stories like six parters, or in this case, a seven parter, it's kind of a bit hit and miss. Sometimes they make great use of that extra time. Inferno certainly, I would say, does. Um, so it's a great kind of it's really interesting how they Doctor not explored the parallel universe idea up until Inferno, because it is a very sort of cliche kind of sci-fi idea, and you would expect Doctor to have done it a lot earlier, but they didn't. But when they did do it, it worked out really well with Inferno, and it's just a kind of, I mean, it's just great, really. I mean, yeah, I can't,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I would agree. I love Inferno. It's not on my list, but I do love it. I think it's a fantastic story. It's the first proper use of parallel universes in Doctor Who that's done really well, and it kind of carries that 7-part story because it's not just an alternative universe, but it's also about that universe being destroyed. It's like, and you've got an alien in there and everything. It's not like the only novelty is, oh, we're in a parallel universe, but actually there's that whole added dimension of the primords and all that stuff going on at the end of the universe and stuff, which I just think is, or the end of the world at least, which I think is really cool. But Ryan, any disagreements there on Bill's list?
No, not really. I think they're all solid choices. I mean, Green Death and City of Death were on my honourable mentions, and I will agree that City of Death, it is probably Douglas Adams's best script, even though I really enjoy Pirate Planet and even Sharda. City of Death is still his masterpiece, without a shadow of doubt.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can agree with that, certainly. And Charlie, tend to agree?
Yeah, it's a really solid list again. Green Death, it's not quite a masterpiece for me. It's great, it's a fun story, but I feel I would rather that Jo leaves in a story that is like Frontier in Space, or one where, I don't know, one that's not just like maggots in a cave. Like, I like the whole conspiracy idea, but I just think it could have been a slightly better send off for Jo. But at the end of the day, the characters are great. The actual send off scene is amazing. And it's just like one last hurrah for the unit era. I feel it's just kind of it's not quite the end of an era, because obviously we still have unit in all the way up to like season 13, but it just feels like the end of the classic unit Pertwee era, and I love it. But yeah, it's not quite a masterpiece for me. All the others are like, yeah, top 20, top 25 material, definitely. City of Death is a masterpiece.
Yeah.
Yeah, Inferno is amazing too. I love it. It used to be my favorite Doctor Who story ever. It's moved on a little bit. I'd say I can't really bother to get my spreadsheet of yeah, I have a spreadsheet of all of them.
Oh, I do too. We all, don't worry. It's not an uncommon thing.
I've got I rate them all out of 100. Inferno, I think, is somewhere between 6th and 10th. It's definitely top 10. But yeah, all solid choices again. And now the floor is yours, Elliot.
Ah, yes. So as I said, my list was about 10 before we started this podcast. I have narrowed it down to 5, so that's good. One's not on my list, but are worth mentioning. Earthshock. We haven't had a mention of that yet today, I don't think, but that's a cracker of a story with the Sidemen cliffhanger, and just generally, I think it's it's a great story, and Adric's death and all of that. It's a really strong one. City of Death, we've obviously mentioned. Caves of Androzani. I'm kind of surprised nobody's had it in their top 5, but neither have I. Again, I think it's really good. It is a really good episode of Doctor Who, but I also feel like it's not overrated, but it's just like people go, "Oh my days, is the best story ever." I'm like, it is really good, but I just wouldn't quite put it in like my absolute top tier. So that's not there. And the Green Death as well. I was like, oh yeah, that's a really, really good one, but again, just not quite. So probably number 5 is probably my most wild choice, and I picked Warrior's Gate.
Wow.
As you do. I picked Warrior's Gate at number 5.
That is a solid choice.
There you go. I know. You weren't expecting that, were you?
No. I mean, when we were discussing seasons, I think it was seasons 10 and 18. This was like pre-Bill, like 2021, sort of.
Yeah.
I remember we were sort of mentioning, like, you guys convinced me to watch Warriors Gate again, and you're saying like it's a surreal. You got to embrace the surrealness of it,
Yes.
and I did, and I thought it was all right. I rated it like, I think it was like 79 out of 100.
Okay.
Not top 5 material though. That
I mean,
that caught me
on
off
mine,
guard.
I think on mine, because I do it like, well, essentially the same, but like mine, I think it was 8.7 out of 10, something like that, 8.8, somewhere around there. Mine was rated out from when I last watched it, and I just like it's really different to almost all of classic Doctor Who, which is something that I really like. I really like Doctor Who when it's more experimental. That's why I love Heaven Sent. That's one of the best. Well, that probably, we'll see what that ends up in the new Who one, but it'll be in the top 5. And just that whole setting, the sort of the like alternative universes getting trapped in E-space, the whole setup of it, the Tharrel's in it, a really interesting sort of villain and monster that are sort of enslaved, and there's this whole storyline around it. And I just find that whole setting fascinating. The visuals I think are just so different. Like, it's so unique to this story. All of that the sort of gateway, that mysterious big sort of door, sort of medieval doorway in the middle of a white nothingness, and just the TARDIS that's like floating on this white cloud of nothingness. I just think just all the kind of visual imagery, I just think really just makes it so unique. And then when you have the Doctor walking through this almost like pencil drawn sort of gardens outside this house where they've sort of converted the sort of photos they've used to kind of portray this different universe that they're within, I just think is, again, just visually it has all these really interesting aspects to it, alongside a story that's really complicated. I could not tell you the whole plot right now because it's blooming complicated, but it's worth it. I feel like it's worth the effort to invest in it because it's just really, it's such a different Doctor Who story, and I really like experimental stuff. So that's pretty my most wild choice, but there you go. Warriors Gate, number 5. Number 4 is The Invasion, 8-part Cyberman story from 1960s. No one's mentioned that yet, and I've always loved it. I think I probably first watched it 10, 12 years ago, and yes, it is really long. I know it is 8 episodes long, and in some bits, yes, it probably does drag a little bit. We don't really see the Cybermen until the end of episode 4, I think, or maybe even episode 5. But just the way it's built up, you have Tobias Vaughan, one of the best Doctor Who kind of evil villains ever, in my opinion. I think as an actual just pure villain who just happens to be working with the Cybermen, I think he's brilliant, and him sparring with Patrick Troughton, all of that stuff is great. All this mysterious stuff around the International Electromagnetic Factory, and just the way that it's shot, the sort of really sort of sinister, mysterious music that's done by Don Harper in this story, I think just sets the scene so well. Obviously, all the stuff with the Cybermen later on, in St. Paul's Cathedral, all that stuff is also fantastic. And I just feel like, again, I think I'm quite a person for like visual iconography, and again, this is just a really distinctive story where you just remember those shots of Cybermen on St. Paul's Cathedral. Yes, they did it in Death in Heaven, but this is the original. This is the proper one. And I just think it's got a great TARDIS team, great villains. I just think overall it is, yes, it's quite long, but I do think it really works. You've got Lethbridge Stewart in there, you sort of the kind of first startings of UNIT as well. I love the whole UNIT era, so this is kind of the preamble to that, and I think it just works so effectively. And so that's why I was kind of like thinking, do I put Earthshock or do I put The Invasion? Because I was like, a Cyberman story, but I was like, no, I prefer Invasion, so that's going in here. So that's number 4. Number 3, my other slightly wild choice, Season 7 of Doctor Who. You could basically pick any of them and slot them into the top 5 as far as I'm concerned, because they were all great. And I'm pretty sure, Charlie, I came and did a podcast with you where I said this story, The Ambassadors of Death, is amazing. I love it so much. It's another kind of James Bond style story. I almost feel like, yes, it's got about 10 writers, and some of it doesn't perfectly make sense, but it's just action-packed through all 7 episodes of it. I don't feel like it's a story that drags. You've got, people turning on people. You don't know quite who's the good guy, who's the bad guy for about half the story. The sort of whole setup of having it done almost like through a live TV broadcast at the very start of it, of, trying to find this Mars Probe 7 or whatever it's called. It's just a really interesting way to set it up. The ambassadors, we never really know that much about them. They're so mysterious. We even go to like their sort of planet or spaceship or something, and we never quite, you never quite properly see them. It's sort of through these kind of cuttings in windows, and we just kind of get a glimpse into their worlds, but we never really learn about them. I just think that leaves, just opens up so many interesting possibilities to it as well, and it just keeps that pace up with these mysterious ambassadors throughout it. There's some quite dark moments. There's like helicopters in it, that whole chase scene where they steal the the probe off the lorry with people jumping off motorbikes, helicopters, bombs, smoke bombs. It's just love it. Again, visuals, love them. It's great. And then my number 2, which I'm amazed nobody has said, and it's kind of boring, I guess, is Genesis of the Daleks. Which, whereas Caves of Androzani, I'm like, maybe it's very slightly overrated. Genesis of the Daleks, I'm like, actually, I can't deny this is a fantastic story. Like, what has not been said about Genesis of the Daleks? I don't think there is a lot, but obviously Davros's first story is amazing. How the genesis of the whole concept of creation of the Daleks is just so interesting and plays out so well. Davros is obviously an amazing villain, and seeing him sparring with Tom Baker is just, some of the pinnacle of classic Doctor Who. I think those moments, the whole, dilemma of should we kill the Daleks and all this is all just really interesting moral stuff as well. And yet it is just actually as good as people say it is. I think that's almost all I can say about it. It's always in people's top 5s, and I think actually it really should be. So there's my 4. I'm sure you're all going to disagree with Warriors Gate, but any other thoughts on my 4 so far?
Warriors Gate was an honourable mention along with State of Decay from that season. I think those 2 are the best stories of that season.
Yeah,
I think they're really good. Ambassadors of Death, I had a feeling was going to be in your top 5 because it is. I know that you and Charlie absolutely love this story, and it is a really good story. And that also was an honourable mention as well. The Invasion was this close to being in my top 5. It was my first Patrick Troughton story actually, and that like the War Games, that never dragged for me. I think it's such a good paced story, and well, when Genesis dies, I don't know if I can. Yeah, a bit jumping the gun. I don't want to really say anything else.
Fair enough. Charlie, what did you want to say about my list?
Yeah, it's all solid picks. Obviously, I love Ambassadors of Death. It's probably my top honorable mention. It's got like 96 out of 100 for me. It's amazing. We discussed it at great length.
We did.
About a year ago now. It was
Great time.
Genesis of the Daleks, kind of overrated. Like, it's great, but it's like, I don't know. It's not amazing. It's no, it isn't. It is amazing. It's not top 10, top 20, 25 maybe, but yeah, it's not that good in my opinion. Ambassadors of Death, I did expect that to be at the top though. I am intrigued as to what your number 1 spot is.
I was debating it, but I decided to change it.
Yeah, and Invasion's great too. Top like 15, 20 material for me. It's all solid picks.
Okay, Bill, any big disagreements before we go for the top picks?
I think that's a quite good list though. Again, Warriors Gate, I don't know.
Maybe I'll watch it next time and go, actually, why on earth did I pick this? But I feel like it's really good. So
yeah, I mean, when I watched it a few weeks ago, I couldn't really understand it very well, but I get what you mean in terms of the imagery. Anyway, certainly the imagery is one of the strongest elements of that. The Ambassadors of Death, I mean, that is good. I'm not sure if I would put it so high personally, but I do agree that there's a lot of just great stuff in that. As you say, it's a great spy thriller. Genesis, again, I would say, I mean, you could argue maybe it is a bit overrated in some aspects, but at the same time, I don't think I would have it too low down, really. I think it would still be in like top 15, top 10 or something like that. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Right. I think it's time to reveal each of our best of Doctor Who. I have a sneaky suspicion that 3 of us are going to say the same story. So we're going to go around the room and we're all going to reveal it, and then we're going to find out. Ryan, you go first. What's your top number 1?
I'm cheating a little bit for this one because it's a tie. I could not decide which
You're
one.
breaking the rules.
Yeah, I know, breaking the rules here, but it was difficult, and the reason is because these two were my entry into Doctor Who. They were the first ones I ever watched. I think I mentioned them before, but it was these two that inspired me to become the Doctor Who fan I am today. They're both Tom Baker ones, and they are Ark in Space and Genesis of the Daleks. I love these two. With Ark in Space, I think Russell T Davies and Stephen Moffat said that this was their personal favorite, and I think I can understand why it is now and why I love it so much, because I think it's the most purest Doctor Who story there is. I think that's the best way to describe it. It's just pure because everything you want in a Doctor Who story is in there. Just like a tense, horrific situation, a nasty monster, and just a bunch of people trying to survive, and the Doctor trying to solve everything as it goes along. And in a way, you can, if you never watched Doctor Who before, you can pretty much start with this one, and you wouldn't feel lost at all. I feel like this is a good gateway into Doctor Who, and probably again why it was the first one I watched. And in a way, it was lucky I went with this one first because it's such a good introduction to Doctor Who. It's a good blend of sci-fi and horror. It's the perfect mixture of the two, and it perfectly set the tone for what was to come for this Philip Hinchcliffe, Robert Holmes golden age of Doctor Who. This was the template for it in a way, and of course, this was the first one that Hinchcliffe and Holmes did together. I know Robot was the first one, but that was done by Barry Letts and Terence Dicks from Pertwee years. So this was their first one, and it shows why this was such a great team because it was such a damn good story. And Genesis of the Daleks is exactly the same, and for all the reasons that everyone said, Davros is my favorite Doctor Who enemy of all time. I'm putting it out there. I think he's probably my favorite, and I don't think he's ever been better in terms of how he functions within a narrative. This is the best narrative function use of Davros there's ever been because everything he does in this story is so perfect, and it shows why the Daleks are such a perfect extension of him, and just the allegories, the themes of this story is just also perfect. Tom Baker at the top of his game, such an iconic story. If it wasn't for these two stories, I wouldn't be the Doctor Who fan I am today. I mean, yes, you could say these two stories are perhaps a bit overrated, but because they were my first Doctor Who's, they aren't to me, and for obvious reasons.
Yeah, exactly. I can't disagree with any of that, to be honest. I think it's fair enough, really. So we'll keep going around the room. Bill, your top story is?
Right, so it was mentioned earlier. So it's best if I just say it.
Yeah.
The War Games.
Yeah.
Yep. I would say, this is my favorite Doctor Who story of all time because it's like you said, I think earlier, Ryan, like, yes, it's 10 episodes long. So really, it shouldn't be as enjoyable as it is, but it is. And it is just such a great last hurrah for the second Doctor. And, that final episode 10, even if you just watched that one episode, if you didn't want to risk like 10 episodes, if you wanted to watch the final episodes, that's all you would necessarily need to in terms of like setting up the John Pertwee era because obviously it sets it up, and then it's also just a very emotional kind of episode with the Doctor saying goodbye to Jamie and Zoe, and it's just so well done, and you can tell that like the emotions were probably real, really, that it wasn't acting, it was just, Patrick Troughton really was sad they were all sad to be saying goodbye to each other. And then just the Time Lords, they are introduced really well, really effectively. And as you say, it was probably the best portrayal that they've ever had. And also just the warlords themselves, the main villains, they're really good. That is just it's like I think Terence Dicks or Derek Sherwin said it best about it. Like it's a really good premise for a story, it all being about these war games and everything. being set up by this alien race, because it's a good long 10-part story. Like, it's a good premise for a long story, because you think about how many wars we've had over the years, and you could just keep stretching it and stretching it, and it would still flow very well. And indeed, it does flow very well. You've got hundreds of different characters being introduced, and yet it still, for me anyway, it still kind of functions really well as a story. Like, it should be, I mean, you could say maybe some episodes of it are better than others, and maybe it does get a bit bogged down, like maybe halfway through or so. But I mean, that's to be expected with 10 episodes. I mean, look at the Daleks Master Plan. That is seen as a really great story, and yet really they could have just made that a 6-parter, because half of that is just the Doctor and co just going different places and being chased around and everything. So yeah, I would say the war game, completely justifies it being as long as it is, and it's a really great last story for any Doctor. I would also say that it's probably the best final story. Yeah, what else can be said, really?
Well, exactly. Well, I think we're going to come to you, Charlie, and I think there might be more to be said.
War games.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's not really much to say that hasn't already been said, to be honest. So I'm just going to sort of say, yeah, the War Games, it's great. 10 episodes, 4 hours long. It's insane. I watched this more or less in one sitting. I kind of had like an hour break halfway through, but I basically I watched this in a day, and it's just so incredible. Yeah, it's heartbreaking with the companion exits. And like you said, it's real. These emotions are real. They were sad. Yeah, all the characters. Obviously the Time Lords. Like at the end of episode 9, where you got the slow motion shot of the Doctor and Jamie reaching for the TARDIS, and it's all the Time Lords. They're coming. It's just so epic. I love it. It's fantastic. And Elliot,
the War Games.
Yay.
Wow.
I don't think there's anything else to be said. This is what I sense would happen. That 3 of us picked the same story. So there you go. Clearly, the War Games is absolutely great. Yeah, I don't really have anything else to say apart from it's a 10-episode masterpiece. It doesn't drag where you think it would. I know it's a bit escape capture, but it just works because you've got all these different locations, you've got these different walls, different characters, keeps it interesting. The ending is brilliant, sad, everything about it's great. All the stuff with the Time Lords being introduced is brilliant as well. And yeah, it's just, I have definitely watched it once, all in one go. I think the last time I watched it in 2 lots of 5, but I definitely have sat down and watched the full 4 hours before, and it is worth it. It's definitely worth it. Get some snacks, and it's definitely worth it. It's just such a great classic story. I think there's nothing else that can be said more than that. It's the truth, really.
I feel like such a bit of an odd one out to put it at number 2, but I was close. It was
exactly
close to be my number 1.
Three tops and a number 2. It's not bad, is it?
Yeah.
I think we've got a consensus.
Definitely.
So that's good. Right, we're going to crack on because time is moving. We'll get on with the bottom 5, the worst of Who. Hopefully, we'll have it'll be a bit more just it's terrible with some of this stuff. So what we're going to do, just to save a little bit of time, we're all going to reveal all 5 rather than doing just 4. So we'll just go around the room and reveal all 5 and have a few quick thoughts on it. Let's start with Bill this time. Bill, you can hit us first. Give us your 5 worst episodes of classic Doctor Who. It's okay. There's a bit of pressure here because you could get judged really badly depending on what you pick. So
yeah. Well, it's a good thing you chose to go with me first because I feel like one of them is going to be mentioned quite a bit. So I'm just going to say it right now. Warriors of the Deep.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I mean, a lot of these really they're bad because of a lack of a proper budget, essentially.
Yes. True.
And Warriors of the Deep, a classic example of that. I don't think the story it's trying to tell is necessarily bad. I think there's some good kind of Cold War like stuff there, but it just gets lost and muddled in just how cheap it looks, quite frankly. And the Merca does not help that at all. There's also, I don't get that. I can't remember her name, but I can't get that lady who decides to karate chop it. Yeah. Yeah. I don't get why she did that.
Nope.
No
one does.
I wouldn't be surprised actually if that was like an ad lib kind of moment of like it wasn't even in the script.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either.
Yeah, what can I say about Warriors of Deep? Oh no, also another great moment of Warriors of Deep quickly. I love I think it's the cliffhanger to episode 1 where Turlo says the doctor's dead, and yet he's only been in water for about 5 seconds. And he so easily swims away.
Yeah. Face it, Tegan, he's drowned.
Yeah.
So melodramatic. Jeez. Yeah.
Oh my God.
And then so moving swiftly on from that. The Web Planet.
The Web Planet. Oh dear.
Yeah.
Again, budget. I mean, again, it's trying to be really ambitious, and that is, I think, commendable. And there's certainly, again, idea-wise, it's fairly good, but it's just the execution of it. Like the directing doesn't help. The directing is just, I mean, there's not really much going on there.
And then he loves the story. Apparently, he really loves it.
I don't know. I think, the Web Planet is just too ambitious for its own good, and they were trying to do something, but the budget just was not there for it. The Twin Dilemma. I mean, I'm sorry, but if anybody loves it, that's fine. You know, I get it, but honestly, I think it's just not a great way to introduce a Doctor, and you can tell that there were scripting issues with it, and just various things that just didn't work in its favor ultimately. It's a real shame. Maybe you could have salvaged something better out of it, but I just think there was too much going against it. Similarly, Time Lash. I mean, that's again, I feel like that too much going against it. The money just was not there for it. I think it's saying something when I would rather have had Glenn McCoy's original idea that involved the Daleks as opposed to what we got, even though Eric Say would turn that down. Them two, I think, are often quite low in fans' estimations, and everything that needs to be said about them two has already been said. And then my number one worst one, I mean, it was difficult because, as I said earlier, it's like, I basically would have to go with the ones that I just do not think work, basically, like in terms of budget or in terms of how they were realized or whatever, because, I mean, that's unfair in some ways, but, you know, it's like they're the only ones that kind of leave, like there are lots of Doctor Who stories that other people will say really bad, and I just think, you know, I don't have any strong impressions either way. But Underworld, it's just it could have been a really interesting story, but again, the money just was not there for it. Nothing worked in their favor, and the fact that they didn't even have sets for like 99% of it just does not help. I mean, it's just awful. It's a pain to watch, really. Because you want to give it a fair shot. You want to say, well, look, they're doing their best here with what limited resources they've got. But I personally, anyway, I just can't. I mean, it's almost unwatchable, really.
I think that's the key word. It's almost unwatchable. It really is that bad, isn't it? Any thoughts, Charlie? Any disagreements there?
I think they're all. I all sort of agree with them. You know, there's nothing there where I'd actively disagree. Only two of those are in my list.
Okay.
And I might as well segue this into my own list.
Yeah, go for it.
I've actually written down my rating out of 100 with these as well.
Nice.
In fifth place with 27 out of 100 The Creature from the Pit. I know it's hilarious. I know it's ridiculously
but it's
stupid.
also bad.
But I've got to look through it and say this is a really bad Doctor Who episode or story.
Yeah.
It's so stupid. The production value is really bad. It's just peak. Like, what were they thinking? Like that one scene with Tom Baker.
Yeah.
Honestly,
Who thought that was a good idea?
that whole the 26. That scene is the 26. If it wasn't that, it'd be a 0.
Oh dear.
I bet he ad-libbed that. I bet he ad-libbed that.
Probably.
It's
thought
pretty
so.
horrendous. Even looking past it though, it's a horrendous story. There's like 2 whole episodes of just Tom Baker running away from Arato in the caves. It's just what are they doing?
True. Oh dear, yeah.
Place, 4th place with a whole 22 out of 100. Time and the Rani. No one said this yet, but I really don't like this, and I think it's a shame because I actually like the McCoy era. I think it's cool. I really think it's a good era.
Mhm.
But I just don't like it. The production values are really bad. Mel is Mel, and I know it's not really Bonnie Langford's fault, and I'm still glad she appeared in Power of the Doctor, and she gets reasonably better, but in this story she's just not good. And it's just the whole plot with the Rani is just what has Doctor Who come to, you know? I first watched Time in the Rani after watching The Demons. And it was
talk about a downgrade.
That's a jarring change, yeah.
Now for 3rd place, 18 out of 100, and it's already been said, and there's nothing more to say. Warriors of the Deep.
Yeah.
Horrendous production values. It's just awful. That cliffhanger just. I'm not going to say anything more because it's already been said.
Fair enough.
2nd place with a whole 12 out of 100.
Woo.
Underworld. It's been said. It's 3 episodes. I mean, the first episode is actually fine. Like, it's not fine. It's okay. It's not great. It's not bad. It's just there. But the last 3 are so boring. I fell asleep twice watching this.
Wow.
And it, for a good reason, it is so bad. It's already been said. And 1st place, we've only got like a minute left of this. This is going to be a huge episode. With a whole 8 out of 100.
Ooh.
And this is a hot take.
Oh boy.
Possibly, actually. And I'm not even sure if this counts as a story. Because it's 14 episodes long and it's Trial of a Time Lord. It's so bad.
The whole of Trial of a Time Lord.
I don't get what they were thinking. The plot is just so confusing and convoluted. I don't know what's going on. I mean, you have the individual stories, and they'd be like 5 out of 10 on their own. If it wasn't for the fact they kept getting interrupted by weird courtroom scenes, and it's just so meta, like watching people watch Doctor Who. Like, I kind of get the idea of doing something different, and they had the 18-month hiatus, but it's just so like, what were they thinking? It's so bad.
Yeah, it's basically classic Who's equivalent to Flux, basically.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't rate Flux 8 out of 100 though.
There are certain sections of Flux that are pretty solid, but the rest of it is just like Trial of a Time Lord. It's just like, what were they thinking?
It's the classic Who equivalent of not Flux. I'd say the Vanquishers. It's that.
Yeah.
Like the rest of Flux wasn't that bad. The Vanquishers was.
Yes.
Wait till we get onto the new Who episode.
Oh, well, thanks, Charlie, for those interesting picks. We'll move on to Ryan. We're nearly there, guys. I know it's a long podcast, but we're nearly there. Ryan, hit us with your bottom 5 of classic Doctor Who.
Yeah, well, this is going to be first a bit controversial thing out of the way. Creature from the Pit is not in the bottom 5.
Wow.
So here's the thing. I can't hate something too much if it made me laugh. And boy, did it make me laugh out loud. And of course, it made my niece laugh out loud with what she describes as the Moody Doody monster. So
there you go.
I can't disagree with that. So yeah, and Underworld was also a bit close. It would be my number 6 for the reasons you described. It was very close. My number 5, The Space Pirates. I know this is a bit controversial because most of it doesn't exist, but honestly, even with the one part that exists, it's so dull. And with even listening to the full soundtrack, that's painfully dull. And even if you put animation to this, I don't think that would save the story, to be honest, because even listening to it, it's like nothing can save this story. Like if you listen to the soundtracks of Enemy of the World or Fury from the Deep, you would think these are great stories and that would get a new life with animation. It's not the same with Space Pirates. Even listening to it, it's just so painfully dull in every single aspect. It just feels like they're stalling for a good amount of 6 weeks until we get to the best stuff with the 10-part Patrick Troughton Swan song that we've all talked about at length. But yeah, Space Pirates, talk about going from the bottom of the barrel of Patrick Troughton to these absolute best one in.
Yes.
So what a redemption story.
Well, indeed.
My number 4, The Twin Dilemma.
Mm-hmm.
For all the same reasons, like it just feels so misguided from the get-go. Like, who would have thought this would have been the best way to introduce a new Doctor? And the fact that this whole misguided introduction is tacked onto what is essentially a bare bones story that is so bog standard with these twin geniuses that who don't really come across like geniuses. They're so boring that make the prospect of watching paint dry a more fascinating concept. And there's Nestor, that slug thing that just doesn't look good at all. The slug monsters, it looks so painful, and yeah, it's just a horribly misguided story. And the fact that this kind of set the tone for most of Colin Baker's run is not a good sign at all. And it pretty much was the final confirmation that Doctor Who was at its end. If Warriors of the Deep started that, Twin Dilemma was the final confirmation, pretty much.
Yeah.
My number 3, Time Flight.
Oh yeah, I'm not that yet.
This was so painful to experience. Like, the idea of a plane flying back to prehistoric Earth is not that bad, but it's such a horrible production. It just looks horrible. The writing's horrible. Everything about it's just really horrible. And also the fact that it was made at the end of the series, at that point the budget ran out, and putting in an iconic villain halfway through to try and boost it up just does it no favors at all whatsoever. Part 3 especially is one of the most painful Doctor Who episodes to sit through because it's just so poorly done. It beggars belief that it actually sort of made the light of day, to be honest. My number 2, also equally painfully slow, The Two Doctors. Honestly, the story where most of the time nothing happens. Honestly, for about a good chunk for nearly all of it, just nothing happens. And the fact that you have 2 doctors in there, they don't interact for most of it. And for a good chunk of it, Patrick Troughton's just captured, tied up, or possessed. Which is not really a good use of Patrick Troughton. And it just feels like such a very lazy, bare-bones story, so they could show off a bit of glorious scenery in Spain. That's all it is, really. And as I said, nothing really happens because it's loaded to the gills with padding, with a lot of so many sequences that could have easily have been cut out and would have made a difference. And the Sontarans are there for no real reason at all, other than we need to have an iconic monster in there. It's such a painful story. My dad would also say it's the worst story in Doctor Who history. He really doesn't like this, and it was close.
Yeah.
But my number 1,
obviously,
Warriors of the Deep.
Yeah. Yeah.
What else is there to be said about this that hasn't already been said? I mean, I've talked about this endlessly in the past, so I'm just going to pretty much repeat what I've just said. Just like every single thing about it is wrong. Everything. Performances, wrong. Monsters, wrong. Music, wrong. Sets, wrong. Writing, wrong. Wrong on every single level. And you can pretty much all the behind the scenes stories, all behind the scenes troubles, they all just bleed out into this production. Like, you can definitely see the flaws on screen, especially when it comes to the Merkin, where, the people behind it had very little to no rehearsal time in it whatsoever. So pretty much, the costume was factory, just fresh off the factory, and so they complained it felt like they were sniffing glue when they were inside there. So you could almost say that it caused them to almost like abuse drugs almost. And of course, this was the story that kind of started. It was really the beginning of the end of Doctor Who, because of course Michael Grade, who became controller of BBC One by then, had a very low opinion of Doctor Who. And I think it was pretty much this story that was the catalyst for that, because when he appeared on Room 101 all those years later, he used a clip of that infamous clip of the Merkin Ingrid Pit to show why he hated the show so much. So when you combine that with all the context of everything that's happened, it's just a real painful experience to watch.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. And for that reason, that's why it's my number one.
Wow. I think it's fair enough. I mean, I must say personally, War is the Deep isn't on my list, bottom 5, remarkably, but it's still pretty close, but it's not quite in the bottom 5. But no, I think it's a fair list. I think, Bill, any quick thoughts on Ryan's list?
I agree with most of it, but I will say, and you're probably all going to hate me for saying this, but I do not think the Space Pirates is that bad.
Ooh.
Whoa.
I don't think it is like brilliant, and certainly the War Games is far better than that. I will give you that, definitely. But I do feel like it is a fun-ish sort of story. I feel like if we had more of it, that would help a lot, because I feel like it's like the Celestial Toymaker, for example. Having most of that missing does not help that story at all. The Celestial Toymaker, you need to be able to actually see what's going on. The Space Pirates is pretty much the same. It also doesn't help that episode 2 is the only episode that does survive, and that is probably the worst episode to have survived of the Space Pirates, because nothing happens in that episode at all. Even I admit that. I mean, I would have far much rather, if I'd have been, not that I would have been, but if I had have been in charge of like keeping one episode of that, go with something later on, episode 5 or something, where there's at least stuff going on, but no, I rest of the list, and I'm not gonna say that I think the Space Pirates is like a masterpiece. It is certainly not. No. It's by no means, and I would say I do enjoy it, but it is one of the bottom. It is in the bottom run of the Patrick Troughton stories. But
not quite that bad. Exactly. Cool. Right. Well, I'm going to roll my list because we are almost out of time for tonight, but I will quickly throw my list. What didn't make it was the Armageddon factor didn't quite make it. Criminally boring, which is the main problem. I fell asleep twice watching that. Really dull. Terrible end to the Key to the Time arc, but not quite in the list. And the Gunfighters as well. I just can't handle the whole terrible musical Doctor Who thing going on. Just not the one. Really not the one, but not quite bottom 5. So number 5 is Underworld. We've said it all already. Looks terrible. Episode 1 is alright, but the rest of it is unbelievably dull. And it's not saved by being visually interesting. It looks visually terrible. We all know why, and I understand why, but it doesn't mean that the story isn't also really bad. So, sits at number 5. Number 4 is The Space Pirates, as we just said. I also agree that it's just... I know it doesn't all exist, and maybe the animation would make it a little bit better, but I don't think you can get away from how just fundamentally boring the storyline is, the whole actual plot of this story, how little the Doctor and companions are actually in the story or involved. I don't think they're even really involved in the resolution of the plot at all. Like, it's just such a weirdly written story. So, don't enjoy it. I really would be hard pushed to ever go back and even try and watch the recons of it, unless I really had to, I guess. But yeah, really, really bad. One that no one has mentioned so far is Delta and the Bannerman, which is also just not one for me. I'm sorry, it's not one for me. I can tell Charlie is really unhappy with that decision, but no, it's really not. No, it just doesn't. It just feels so weird, just so all over the place. There's there's some good stuff in it, but like most of episode 2 and 3 is just them riding motorbikes around with the most ridiculous music playing in the background that doesn't fit Doctor Who in the slightest. Like, I know half of 80s music is a bit, weird, but that's just another level of nonsense. The green baby that they're all just completely fine with for no apparent reason. There's no explanation. They're just all chill with it. Like, I just don't get any of it. So
I think it's so bizarre and it's hilarious, and I think that's maybe why I'm not too harsh, because it's so bizarre that it's laughably just like what it's like they keep front loading every bizarre thing. It's just so funny.
Yeah, and and then the dude just decides to go off with this woman and and the green baby and all of it, and it's just he's just fine with it all. He's just chilling. He's just becoming one of them and going off into space. Doesn't really mind. It's all chill. So yeah, I understand why people like it, and I probably would laugh at it more than some stories that aren't on this list. But I also do think it's just not for me. It's not for me. Simple as that. Then number 2 is The Ultimate Foe, End of Trial of a Time Lord. I agree generally it's not great. I kind of like what it does more so than others. Yes, it's basically 13 episodes of Colin Baker reaction shot cliffhangers that are always, zoom into the camera, shocked face, are quite funny. But I just think Ultimate Foe, it just all falls apart. It really all falls apart. Like, I'm like, yes, it's not great all along, but at the end, where they could have made something of it, it just feels so messy. I get, I'm struggling to even follow what's going on half the time. It's all terribly darkly lit. I know they're trying to go for spooky, but actually it just makes it difficult to even watch those last couple of episodes. Stuff in the Matrix, I'm like, this is going to be really cool. And then it's just really actually quite boring and doesn't make a lot of sense, doesn't give a satisfying conclusion. And that's like 13 weeks down the drain. And you're just like, why? So yeah, really don't rate it. I think the rest of it's okay. Mind Warp's actually quite good. Like, each of the 3 individual stories, I'm like, they're actually all right. But then at the end, it falls apart. And then number 1, I feel like it's number 1 on this occasion. Maybe another time it'd be different. But on this occasion, it is Arc of Infinity. That I love Gallifrey stories. I love Deadly Assassin. I love The Invasion of Time. This is awful. Everything about it is just it's just such a rubbish Gallifrey story, when it's the sort of stuff I love in Doctor Who, and it just looks really cheap and naff. Omega's not even very good in this story anyway. It's just in Amsterdam for the sake of it, and it's just like the last episode is just Omega disintegrating and running around for a whole episode as Peter Davison. It's just stupid, and I don't like it. And the monsters look ridiculous. Whatever his name is, it Ergon or something? He looks ridiculous. Yeah. There's those couple of like backpacker traveller guys who are terrible actors, and it's just don't like it. I just don't like anything about it, and it annoys me because it's a Gallifrey story that I want to be really good because I really like Gallifrey stories. So yeah,
I'm going to make a slight adjustment to my list. I'm actually forgot about Arc Infinity, and to correct my mistake, I'm putting that joint at number 2 with the 2 Doctors. Because in a way, they both fall apart and have similar flaws, both the 2 Doctors and Arc of Infinity. So I'm going to slightly adjust it, and I'm going to put that at joint number 2.
Okay. So it's a good move because it's a really bad story, and I think it is worth pointing that out, really. But I think, we've covered quite a lot of bad stories today. So clearly there's quite a lot of bad Doctor Who stories, but there's also a lot of good Doctor Who stories. And, maybe I'll wake up tomorrow and go, why on earth did I pick those 5? I'll watch them all again over the next 5 years and find out that actually I now really like Delta and the Bannerman, and it actually is in my top 50, but I'm not convinced. I only watched it like 3 months ago, and I was like, wow, this is not good. So I'm sorry, Charlie, but I don't think my opinion is going to change anytime soon.
I mean, I've heard 6 lists today that aren't mine. That's probably the one I disagree the most with. Delta and the Bannerman. I love Delta and the Bannerman. I know it's ridiculous. I know it's stupid, but it's fun to watch still. Like, Creature from the Pit is ridiculous and stupid, but isn't fun to watch. But this is, I have a blast watching it, It's objectively bad, but that doesn't mean I can't like it. It's like, Arc of Infinity, I don't think it's that horrendous. It's pretty bad. I rated it 48. It's pretty bad. Like, definitely lower end of mid, but I don't think it's that horrendous. The others, I get it.
Yeah.
Arc of Yeah, I mean, if I had to pick some honorable mentions for my
Mhm.
list, I would definitely say like Time Lash, Two Doctors.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, no, I think there are some common ones here, like Warriors of the Deep, like Time Lash,
Yeah,
like Underworld, Space Pirates. I feel like there's a lot of similar choices, but we're also a bit unique with Delta and the Manaman or the Two Doctors
Yeah.
or a few others like that, which I think is good.
I couldn't get mad at the ones that made me laugh, like Creature from the Pit or Delta and the Bannerman, because as weird and bizarre as the stories are, they gave me a good old laugh, so I can't be mad at them too much. I mean, they're not in my bottom 10, they're not even in my bottom 15, to be honest. But I can understand, but I don't know. At least they gave me a good laugh, so I can't really complain too much.
Well, exactly. And I think, with most of Doctor Who, it's either good or it makes me laugh. There's very few that I would truly say are terrible. So I think, that, and we ultimately all love Doctor Who, so I would still watch bad Doctor Who over a lot of other TV. So I guess that's kind of the way to look at it, isn't it? But we should bring this to a close. We've been going for us for like 2 hours. It's probably like an hour and a half for this actual podcast. It's like probably one of our longest ever podcasts as well, which is pretty crazy. We'll try and find a way to shorten this for the New Who one because I feel like this is a little bit too long. But thank you. We could do 4. Maybe we'll do top 4 next time, just to ease it off a little bit. But you'll find out in the next edition of Kavam when we do that. So, yes, let us know if you're watching on YouTube in the comments your best and worst 5 of Classic Who. We'd love to hear them, and I'm sure you guys will be replying. And we'll all be disagreeing with you if we reply to your comments. But, we like to have our own opinions. That's what it's all about, isn't it? But that is just about it from this edition of Kavam. Remember to check us out on Twitter at KavamPod if you haven't already. You can listen to us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, or on YouTube. But from me, from Bill, from Ryan, from Charlie, it is goodbye for now.